Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today you're going to be welcoming you to my nightmare. This is probably the worst designed fishing reel that I've ever worked on, and it has a problem, and I haven't been able to correct it. I'm going in one more time. I've had this open, but the reason I'm doing that is I would like to show you, for reference purposes, how this live liner is set up, and quite honestly, why a lot of folks never work on this darn reel. It's a problem. The springs in here are crazy, and the problems that you get with this is just not worth the effort. As a matter of fact, as I always tell you folks, go out on the web and go get the schematic. This one's so complicated that in the schematic they actually put a little bit about how to set a spring. But then there's another spring in here, and you'll see when I take this apart, there's a little spring right up here, number 76 on your, if you're keeping score, that they don't show you where it belongs. And if you don't have an idea, if what happens to you happened to me the first time I opened up this case and that spring shot out, then that's the whole purpose of this video. And I got a nice little note here. I pulled the schematics from Mystic Parts, and I actually asked them, and they came back and said, the schematic is all we have to go by. We don't work on bait runners or live liners. We tried a Google search and tried finding a YouTube video, but came up short, which says it's, so I'm doing this one for reference work. I've already talked to Mike, its owner. And we have a problem. The problem that came to me was when you tighten all the way down on the drag and you have this in bait feeder mode, you really don't have a tight lock on the spool. And you have some variety. If you back it off, it spins easier, but it never really locks down tight up top. And this is a reel that was originally sold beginning in 2006. And the problem with this is that the spring assemblies or the cup assemblies inside this rear drag have probably worn, don't have enough tension on it to push full for contact. So we're going to try and cheat this one as well. I'm going to try throwing an extra washer in here and see if that makes a difference. But again, the whole idea behind this one is to do this one to show folks how this one goes. If you like these videos, please subscribe. We're trying to build my subscriber base. Please comment. I respond to all comments. And if you have a reel like this or another one that you would like to see, drop me a note. And if one comes in the shop, or if I happen to have one in the shop, then I'll be happy to go do this. We're going to show you the complete servicing of this reel. And it starts with taking off the exterior pieces. I just took off the spool. Now we're going to take off the handle. And then we're going to all take a collective deep breath, sigh, maybe take an anti-anxiety pill while I'm at it. But this is where it exploded on me the first time. So here's what I've learned. The first thing I've learned is don't take it off like this. You have to set the switch to bait feeder mode. If you set the switch to bait feeder mode, it is going to lock in the spring assembly that was shown here. And chances are you can work that out without it exploding. But if you have it up here where it's in release mode, the spring is resting and there's no tension on it. And the problem when you pull the cap is that it pulls it out. So bait feeder mode, there's 4 screws. We'll take those side plate screws out. And as I mentioned, you saw it before, I recommend always getting the schematic for these. You're probably wondering what that gallon Glad bag is doing underneath my hand here, and that's going to be the next thing I learned, how to contain a spring if it's going to shoot. So you'll also notice my my table is a little bit cleaner today because when that one shot the first time, I didn't find it. Now I normally have another project reel. I have a basket with some tools in it, some other things on my table. If this thing shoots, I generally want it to be where I can find it, and if there's a chance that it might just rest on the table, then that's the way I'm going to go with this. So I take those 4 side plate screws out. I know from experience already that the 4 side plate screws are the same, so I'm not going to lay them on my table to check them out. I know that they're the same, so we'll just pull those out. But I do recommend that you do that. And then one more screw, the screw that goes into the arm that holds the release the trip lever. I'm going to back that out. And Mike was a nice guy. He said, you know, if it didn't work, it didn't work. Appreciate you, you know, trying the effort on it. But we'll give it one more go, again, because of that note that I got there and some of the other things that said that this is not generally available. Okay, spring containment. Take that reel, take that gallon food storage bag, put the reel inside the bag. Now, probably makes for a lousy video, but pull the side plate off. Okay, here we go. This is the prize worth the chase, and we're not taking this off any further than it is. I've spent quite some time doing this. You have 2 springs. You have a spring on the throw arm here that rests on the inside of the clip here. We have the bigger spring that handles the retraction of this arm. That spring is located in a notch on the bottom, and it goes on the top. It's kind of got like a Z-clip. It goes on the top hole and through on that side. But here's the mystery piece. This is the throw arm for the anti-reverse to trigger, not the anti-reverse, it's an override, but to trigger when you're in bait feeding mode, the gear, which I haven't taken out yet, the gear is going to come down. It's going to have a point that'll land in here, push this whole assembly back. The reason that it's held on that angle is, here's that part number 76, and it's on the little teardrop side of this control arm, and it's on the fork side of the trip lever. So good luck. If that is flown, good luck finding it. If you're trying to reset it, 2 things to note. This is a trip lever that's not flat on both sides. It has one flat side, and then it kind of like an upside down or a backwards number 9. It does have a bulge on this side. Underneath here there is a hole where there's a prong from this release point that goes in that hole. It leaves you a little gap here to attach the spring and attach to the other side. Again, you want to be in bait feeder mode. You'll notice that there's a rise in this plate here, and that the trip lever rests under that. Again, if you were off bait feeder mode, you'd be back here. That spring would be fully extended, and it would shoot right out at you once the pressure was taken off that trip lever arm. So that's that. We're going to just put that aside for now, because as I mentioned, I am a generous person in heart, but I am not going to tackle this again. Guess where we're putting it? Right into that plastic bag. Because if for some reason something goes bump, I want to find that spring later. Okay, let's rebuild the reel then, and let's get down here to that issue that we're trying to solve by doubling up. First thing I'm going to do is take the axle shaft off. To do that, we're going to pull the screw here. This is a double C-clip kind of a arrangement here, held in by a screw on the cross block. So you're noticing a couple of things. For those who watch the videos know I have a protective glove on my hand to keep the chemicals and stuff off, and I have a parts tray which we've been putting the pieces and parts into behind. It's simply the bottom of a milk jug. I've used food containers, I've used all kinds of things. Just find a place that's convenient. I know a lot of folks like to use magnetic parts trays. That's wonderful. You don't need to go out and spend the money or buy it to do the real repair. You can simply use anything that will hold your pieces and parts. That's that double C-clip I was talking about. And put that in. Now we can pull the axle shaft out. Put that in the bucket. Now we can remove the main gear. And here's what I was talking about. You have pivot points on this main gear. There's a series of 6 of these. One of them is going to grab that indentation in the arm and as it slides down, it's going to push that arm out of the way and put you back into free spooling mode. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to take off the crosswind block. I'm going to take out the crosswind gear. Just to show you how to tune up the reel. Now we're going to come up top and pull the rotor. I think we can do this one with a Phillips head screwdriver. So I also encourage folks to take pictures along the way. If you are unfamiliar with this particular reel setup, then critical junctions, just take the pictures so that you know. It came out easier the first time. Know where the pieces and parts are. I'm just going to grab the, I think that's a 14 millimeter, nope, 13 millimeter. See if we can't just grab it and turn it. There we go. You want to remove the shield if you can. If not, there's enough to grab the nut without that set. I think by now I would have that set out, but that's okay. All right, the nut's off. I'm just going to lay these right on my table here because we're just going to service this. Again, I'm going to show you what it's made out of and go from there. So all you need to do on this one, there's a series of bearings. There's a bearing up top. There's a bearing below. Use fishing reel oil. In this case, I'm using Reel X. Flood the bearing up top. Flood the bearing below. And you don't need to do anything more than that as part of a normal service. Now if this was dirty, which it was when I initially serviced the reel, you would come in and you could take these 3 screws out, you can pull the whole assembly off, you can clean that out. I did that on a previous effort. Again, more of my intention is on documenting how this anti-reverse comes together. Alright, since we've lubed all of that, we're going to put the rotor back on. This time the nut will go back on easier because we have that hold fast off by itself. This is a regular clockwise rotation for the nut. You might want to hold your finger on the pinion gear just so that it pushes up and you can grab it entirely. Give it a spin, make sure it turns nicely, which it does. Now we're going to try and line this up to the hole. I'm off. So you want to either tighten it a little bit more or loosen it a little bit, but between the two you can usually figure it out. And actually I tightened it a little more and probably should have just loosened it back a little bit. A lot of you will notice I use a little awl. It's not a fishing tool, it's a carpenter's awl, a scratch awl. I was doing woodworking for some time, I still enjoy it. But at any rate, it's a good centering pin. If you don't have an awl, you can find all kinds of pins out there. Here's a pin I found. This one belongs to an electronic circuit tester that went bad, but the pin is still good, so I got that. Here's another type of an awl, and I even have an ice pick around here somewhere. So, valuable tool in the toolkit. Don't be afraid to use it. All right, we're going to put that bearing back in. And because we're showing you how to service this, grab some grease. I use Penn Precision Reel Grease for this. Doesn't matter whose manufacturer it is, it matters that it is a fishing reel grease. I'm also going to put some below here. And now I'm going to take off the troublesome assembly that just doesn't seem to be working properly. So we're going to grab that, and this is going to pull out. Now there's a little tension on it, that kind of snaps in there, so don't be afraid to pull it a little tight. Thought I heard my camera going off. Okay, so here's the assembly then. If you had a question as to how these washers go in that schematic diagram, you're going to see what I'm going to take off here. What you won't see is I'm going to try and put an extra washer on top of this metal washer right here below this plastic carrier for the click, and we'll see if that maybe tightens this up or not. Can't make it any worse, so let's see. All right, we're going to remove the top. That's going to show you the new drag assembly that I had in here, but let's just do this in case you've had it exploded now. if I can. So there's a carrier assembly that sits inside of the cap. Next up then is a spring that goes inside the carrier. Then we have this push assembly. When you're screwing this clockwise, it's going to push up on this, pull it all together. It has two sets of wings. It has long wings and it has short. Those long wings are going to sit in these two cavities. So you got to hold that steady there. So it goes over the spring and into those two cavities like that. All right, so then we have what is becoming the bugaboo of this reel. We have a new drag washer that Mike asked me to install. Then we have a metal drag washer and a carrier assembly. This is the carrier assembly. There's actually 3 or 4 pieces on there if you go to the parts diagram. There's a small little washer here. There's the anti-reverse kind of ratchet thing. There's the click ratchet, which is this one. You can see the little metal gear that comes out of that. And then there's the washer that presses down. So if this had enough tension, this washer would press. You'd have the bottom of this, the regular washer, and then the metal washer, and with enough tension those two would press together and it would hold, but that's not holding here. So I grabbed a bunch of washers. I'm going to try and find one that's going to match up. This one's fairly close. Got all kinds of washers here. I have washers from the top drag washers on Penn's. You could have ordered a second one if we had known that this was going to be an issue, but I didn't know this was going to be an issue, so that's why I got one. Oh, look at that. It fits perfectly. So this is from I don't know, it's worn off. But at any rate, it's a washer that's identical to the other one, even better. So I'm going to take the 2 of these then. See if we can't get them in here. Now I was hoping that I could double up on the other side here, but if I do, then I don't get the hold of the metal washer here, and I'm going to need that. So where I'm going with this one then is I'm going to double these up below. And this may or may not work. We have no idea. But if you've got a worn spring, if the bottom of the carrier assembly, if something else is causing this not to work properly, then this is the way it's going to take up that slack. At least in my mind, that's the way it's going to take up that slack. Okay, so I'm going to put this assembly back into the carrier. The only thing you got to watch out for is this click tongue here. You want to make sure that you put that into one of these serrated ridges. Not necessarily the easiest thing to do. You've got to balance it. It's a very tight fit. But again, this is my nightmare reel. I will say right from the beginning, this is one of the worst reels I've ever worked on, in the sense that the mechanics behind that spring assembly is enough to drive anybody crazy. And it's enough to see statements like what you just saw on that one piece of paper there that says we don't work on bait feeder reels, to get it set. Okay, I'm going to apologize. I got it in and I can't take it out to show you again. But again, line up the 2 inner notches with the 2 prongs that are sticking up. Get those notches seated in there, and you'll know you're properly seated when you have a closed case like this. Okay, back to the case, so to speak. We're going to go ahead and put this in then. So you'll notice that that's offset. It's not a 180, it's more like a 270 in terms of the greater arc being in the back to the front. That part goes to the back of the case, and there are 2 slots. And you'll know you're okay when you're lined up with the 2 holes. So there's no screw to put in. Those are the 2 body screws at this point. So let's go put the rest of the reel back together again. And then let's go take that deep breath and see if we can get the firing mechanism back in without flying. On the back end of the crosswind gear, I'm going to be putting some lube. I'm going to check the teeth in between here, make sure that all the teeth are proper. And then when I install, I want that stud down, because when I go to put that lock on for the axle shaft, it has to be in that down position. And unfortunately, Penn did for this reel what they did for a lot of reels. They eliminated the anti-reverse override, and that means you got to twirl it in a cycle to get it down below again. Here's your crosswind gear then, your block. Next up then is the main gear. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to check the teeth on that. You're going to lube that up. Same thing with the drive for the crosswind block behind, as well as the stud for the bearing. All of that lines in. We can then take the axle shaft. Now again, I've had this out and I've worked on it already. It's clean. It's got light lubrication on it. You can put a little bit of grease on there if you wanted to. Don't put too much on it. It'll only clog up top here. But put enough on that it matters. And then just work the whole thing. Let's get it to the camera side. Work the whole thing so that you can get your there we go, we're in. And now you can see that there's a slot below and a slot just above that's going to accept the clip that we took off earlier. The clip has two sides. It has a deep U side and it has a rather flat side. The flat side is the top. Slip each side of the C-clip into those grooves and push down and grab the little screw that goes in that assembly there. And little screws don't get along. Many of you know that. I'm going to try little pliers to see if I can't set it there. That wasn't too bad. Let's see if we can continue and get it all the way in without it flying somewhere. Ah, there you go. We got lucky. Maybe we'll get lucky putting that other piece of the assembly back in. Okay, now's the time to take a deep breath about this assembly. Again, that trip lever is set to on. These little guys are going to flip that trip lever at some point. What I like to do, since this is over here, when this lands, it's going to land over in this area. I just like to kind of center that pin. We're going to turn that whole thing upside down gingerly, because if you nail that thing, if you bump it on something terrible, something terrible will happen. The other thing I've learned with this is once you have this in the assembly, back this off. Just seems to make it easier. I don't know why, just seems to. All right, ooh, almost lost that one. Okay, into the hole, over the bearing. And this is a snap too. You just heard it snap in. So we're closed. Now we're going to put the 4 side plate screws in. And at this point, if you're nervous, you can exhale, because that screw assembly is in place. If there's any problem, it's not going to shoot anywhere. So we're going to trust that we got this right. As I mentioned, I've kind of become a veteran on this reel. I hate it. I think the next one that comes in, I will have learned from, but that's why I'm passing these tips along to you, because this is not the one to get started on if you're just getting started in how do I make these things work. And we'll see if doubling up made any sense at all, or if it just it was a waste of time, but an opportunity to show you how this all works. So here's your 4th screw. I know the anticipation's killing everybody waiting to see if the bait feeder function works. Me too. All right. Backside. You can tell that that's the one that says on. I'll call this the front side then. They just line up. Small. Okay, handle. And let's see if we trip. And we trip. There you go. On, trip off. On, trip off. Now let's see. Okay then, let's see what we got. So we reinstalled the spool, the handle, the trip lever is tripping. I'm going to put this into a bait feeder mode. We're going to pull. Well, it's tighter than it was. Let's see if we can... Nope, we're full tight. So it's tighter than it was. If we move the... back it out. In bait feeder mode. Yep. So we got more tension, but we don't have complete lockdown. Now, you don't need to expect complete lockdown on bait feeders. That's not the idea of working off that back drag. But we get a little bit more sensitivity there. So something is definitely in there that's worn, but at this point you've got a 10-year-old reel or longer that parts are generally not available for. For the most part, you can fish it like this in bait feeder mode. If you've got a really fast running fish, it may spool it out a little bit quicker than you'd like. But again, the idea on bait feeder is let that fish take the bait and run with it before you set your lockdown. So whether he's spooling out 20 or 50 yards really doesn't matter too much. You're going to be into regular fishing mode soon enough. And if it's frustrating and you find that it doesn't have the tolerances that you need, then simply fish it as a straight up reel and not worry about using it as a bait feeder, because it's still perfectly as acceptable as a spin fishing reel. Besides that, of course, they have the two lever drags. There we go. Bait feed mode, click on, click off. That's about as far as we're going to take this one. So for the folks that are viewing this because they've had the side plate apart and had a nightmare similar to mine in terms of how the spring setup works, that was the purpose of doing this video. We also tried to tighten up to take some slop out of this to see if we couldn't get a little bit more compression up top. We added the extra drag washer. That seems to have improved this a little bit, but it's not the cure. There's something else still going on in there, whether it's the carrier or something. Can't figure it out at this point. We've done the best that we can. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you've got this reel, good luck. Try to follow some of the steps that I've done. In all cases, please subscribe. Please tell your fishing friends to subscribe. That's what keeps this channel going. Thanks again. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.